Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight, a winter storm approaching Chicago could snarl holiday travel plans. What you need to know.
Gun owners are tired of being blamed for every madman.
Gun rights groups soundly reject an attempt to ban certain classes of guns.
Efforts to move away from using natural gas to heat homes and what that could mean for the future of energy.
Police scanners across the city are going quiet. Why transparency advocates and journalists are crying foul.
Some are calling for the demolition of unauthorized construction next to a landmark building in Humboldt Park. We share the details.
As the holidays rapidly approach, we talk nutrition and New Year's resolutions with a health specialist.
Who are you? Last week, walked into the production staff that was still on board and said, I'm director.
Longtime actor Isaiah Washington shares more about his directorial debut in a new film.
Behind on your holiday shopping, we peruse what's on offer at the Chicago Fair Trade for any last-minute gifts.
But first, some of today's top stories. More tragedy inside the Chicago Police Department as another officer appears to have taken their own life. The department says an off-duty officer was discovered inside a residence located in the 25th District on the west side early this morning. In a statement, CPD says, quote, the cause and manner of death will be determined by the medical examiner. However, at this time, the death appears to be an apparent suicide. The Chicago Sun-Times reports the officer had been on the police force for 5 years and that she was working as a tactical officer downtown. At least 7 Chicago police officers are reported to have committed suicide this year.
Almost 3 million travelers are expected to pass through O'Hare and Midway airports over the holidays. The Chicago Department of Aviation says that based on projections from the airlines, 2.9 million flyers are expected between December 21st and January 2nd. O'Hare is expected to see a 4.7% passenger increase over the same period last year, while Midway is anticipating a 26% surge in travelers. Thursday, December 22nd, that's the day after tomorrow, is expected to be the busiest travel day.
And we'll see how that goes because those holiday travels could be delayed by approaching bad weather. The National Weather Service has issued a winter storm watch for East, Central, and Northeast Illinois, warning of dangerous travel conditions. Storm watch takes effect Thursday afternoon through late Friday night. Blizzard conditions and wind gusts up to 55 miles per hour are forecast, with possible whiteout conditions and power outages.
Oof. Coming up in the program, gun owners weigh in on a potential assault weapons ban.
First, more on what you can expect during that winter storm anticipated this week. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
We may get a white Christmas, but that is not the biggest weather news of this week. Weather forecasters are predicting possible blizzard conditions starting Thursday. And this mix of high winds, poor visibility, and extreme cold arrive just as the city anticipates a surge in holiday air travel. Joining us now with more on this are Dr. Claudia Fegan, Chief Medical Officer at Cook County Health, and Scott Collis, an atmospheric scientist and department head at Argonne National Laboratory. Welcome back, both of you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Scott, I've been stalking this forecast for the last couple of days. I think a lot of people have. But snow is not the biggest concern here. What can we expect?
That's right. Well, the National Weather Service has actually issued a winter storm watch beginning at noon on Thursday, going through Friday into Christmas Eve. And this is due to this low-pressure system that's sitting actually down in Oklahoma at the moment. It's going to rip up through Texas, all the way through Illinois, Illinois, Ohio, and into Michigan. When it hits Michigan, it's going to intensify rapidly. And when it does that, it's going to make a really strong, we call a pressure gradient, over Illinois, and that's going to bring down really cold winds from our neighbors to the north. And there's not going to be a huge amount of snow there, probably more like 4 to 6 inches, but those flakes are going to be flying sideways, and it's going to reduce visibility, and it's going to make travel throughout our region actually very hazardous from very late Thursday through Friday.
And just to be clear, you said a winter storm watch, not a winter storm warning. At some point, I imagine this is going to get converted?
That's right. So a winter storm watch means all the ingredients are there for a winter storm. A winter storm warning means we're having a winter storm. So watch as we go into Thursday. They'll either issue a winter storm warning or perhaps even a blizzard warning, and that is when we expect visibility less than 1/4 mile and winds consistently gusting over 35 miles per hour.
That's significant. Dr. Fegan, how do you suggest people prepare themselves for this?
Well, we worry with the cold weather, people are at risk for exposure to the cold, so people need to dress in layers, because when you dress in layers, the air between the layers helps to keep you warm and insulate you. We want people to be mindful of frostbite, frost snip. That's overexposure to extreme temperatures. It's not just your fingers and your toes, it's your cheeks and your ears, so cover up. We want you to be careful when you're outside, because people are going to try to shovel the snow as it's coming down, and that's going to cause some problems. So with the cold exposure, it takes less than 30 minutes to get frostbite when the wind is blowing like that. And then if you're out there trying to shovel snow, you're causing increased difficulty if you have a heart condition, high blood pressure. Being out there in the cold exposure increases your heart rate, increases your blood pressure, increases the risk of cardiac events. So we want people to take it easy, take frequent breaks, pay attention to the kids, frequent hot chocolate breaks, bring them inside.
The kids aren't going to argue with that.
Yeah, but it's if you're going to shovel the snow, to take your time. You should be trying to just shove it to the side as opposed to lifting. If you're really fit and you can lift that snow, maybe you should be helping your neighbors. This is a good time to be checking on your neighbors. We worry about people who are going to be trying to heat their homes in unorthodox ways, using stoves, heaters, increases the risk of carbon monoxide poisoning. So check on your friends and neighbors. We want people to be mindful of I say the three risks are the cold exposure, the risk of cardiac events, and the carbon monoxide. Make sure you have carbon monoxide detectors working in the household. Pay attention to them. If they go off, you need to leave. There has to be air, right? You can't just wait, and if you're feeling lightheaded, dizzy, then pay attention to your body. If you're outside and you're feeling lightheaded and dizzy, it might be a cardiac event. You need to pay attention to your body and listen to the signs the symptoms that your body's telling you.
Yeah, good advice. Pay attention. Scott, how do we think this is going to impact air travel or travel in general?
Well, so yeah, air and road are the worst. Airlines don't like strong winds, especially crosswinds that are here, and the pilots kind of like to see the runway. And also with this kind of blowing snow, it's going to be really difficult to clear, because as you clear it, it's just going to blow over again, and it's just going to wash away those road chemicals. And the cold air that's coming through, well, we're going to dip down towards 0 and even into negative degrees. Road chemicals and treatments actually become far less effective there. So if you've got a plan B and you can enact it, now is the time to enact it.
Don't wait until the middle of the day Thursday
Yes,
or the middle of the day Friday. It's too late.
It's too late. It's already here, and everyone else has enacted their plan B, and there's probably no way you can get in or out.
Dr. Fegan, with this kind of weather, you named a lot of symptoms to be on the lookout for. What drives people most to the ER? What are folks not doing right?
Well, we see a lot of cold exposure, and so when your fingers start to turn colors, red and blue and white, to pay attention to that. Certainly, if the skin becomes hot, firm or waxy, then you've already gotten frostbite. So paying attention to that cold exposure, pay attention to that.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, pay attention to that.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the other thing, the cardiac things, I cannot minimize the, people they may not have chest pain, they may have jaw pain, they may have shortness of breath, they have lightheadedness. If they don't feel right, then it's time to stop.
And the symptoms for women are different than for men.
Often women keep pushing right through it and they forget, they have indigestion, they have, it just doesn't feel quite right, then it's time to pay attention.
Scott, we've got an animation of the pressure and the temperatures that are going to be arriving in the Midwest later on this week, and hopefully we can get a look at that shortly. But is there anything out of the ordinary with this system?
Yeah, the way it did dip down and kind of sucked up that moist, wet air, and it's the speed at which that low pressure system intensified. We actually have a word for this, a very colourful word called bomb cyclogenesis, and they're actually really hard storms to predict. That's why you've seen the language we've been using has been very cautious, possibility and so forth, because you're predicting something that is not only moving but changing as it moves. And it's actually that interaction with the warm air from the south and even the warm air from the Great Lakes that's causing this to intensify so rapidly and making it very hard to predict.
Yeah, I've heard the bomb cyclone word get brought up a couple of times, and it sounds like that's why the models have been changing the snow prediction.
That's exactly
which
right.
Is what usually freaks us out, but that's not the thing to be worried about in this instance.
It's the wind and the visibility.
Fun. Scott Collis, Dr. Claudia Fegan, thanks to you both for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
And now, Paris, back to you.
Thanks, Brandis. Illinois lawmakers are pressing forward with an attempt to ban what they describe as assault weapons. But gun rights advocates say it's a fruitless effort because it'll be tossed by the courts, they believe. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with the latest. Amanda, this is the second hearing on this bill. What went down today?
Third, actually, Paris, and
Okay,
we're gonna have more, I bet. And really, what we need to know here is that years of attempts to ban so-called assault weapons in Illinois went nowhere. But that changed this July when a gunman allegedly used an AR-15 style rifle to indiscriminately shoot up an Independence Day parade in suburban Highland Park. Since, the effort to ban such guns has gained momentum. Lawmakers are likely to vote next month on a proposal that would ban future sales of particular guns, as well as what backers describe as high-capacity magazines. Last week, mass shooting victims shared their stories with the legislative panel, giving their reasons for wanting to rid the streets of these guns. Today, gun rights advocates got their turn. Their take that such a ban would be ineffective and illegal. Todd Vandermeid's a longtime gun rights advocate who says that recent court rulings, including the U.S. Supreme Court's Bruin decision, have reset the table. He says the Second Amendment is now a supercharged right, and groups like the NRA will use that to prevent any attempt at banning so-called assault weapons.
Gun owners are tired of being blamed for every madman, every criminal, and every other depraved act that 2.5 million gun owners didn't do. And we're not here to negotiate. I'm here to tell you that if House Bill 5855 or anything remotely like it passes, we will see you in court.
Gun rights owners take umbrage even with the term assault weapons, saying that is intended by activists on the other side to demonize them. NRA lobbyist John Weber calling the guns listed in the bill battlefields. He says that's hyperbole. When, he says, stats show many of the firearms are common. He says some 20 million Americans own an AR-15 style gun, which he called America's rifle. The legislation would also ban magazines that carry more than 10 rounds, an amount he says is standard.
Many commonly owned handguns, for example, have standard magazines, which will be banned, and do not have magazines with a lower capacity, rendering the gun obsolete. Ultimately, passing such a law is perilous for law-abiding gun owners. These magazines are widely used by law enforcement for a reason. They are effective tools for self-defense. Banning standard capacity magazines would only serve to allow criminals to have the upper hand against law-abiding citizens in self-defense situations.
Weber also has a problem with the measures moved to forbid those under 21 from having the ability to get a firearm owner's identification, or FOID card, thereby losing the ability to buy or own guns.
This violates the Second Amendment rights of those who are legal adults and are deemed old enough to vote, serve on a jury, enter into binding contracts, get married, and enlist in the military.
Amanda, what's the reaction been from lawmakers to this testimony?
So it was just that. This was an opportunity for testimony. We didn't have any vote, so hard to say how this is going to go down. But certainly there are legislators who take the side of the NRA. But Democrats also pushing back on that. At one point, the committee chair told the gun rights lobbyists he was sick of their unwillingness to negotiate, asking, what then in the face of violence? Vandermeid responded with a question of his own, asking how lawmakers will bring jobs back to Chicago's south and west sides so someone without a high school diploma can earn a living.
How do you sit there and bring those jobs back to where the role model in the home is somebody who carries a lunch pail or a briefcase to work 40 to 60 hours a week and not the guy on the corner with fancy chains and an Escalade? How do you fix an educational system that not that long ago had a 50% graduation rate? Solve those problems, and you'll begin to solve the problem of the violence you see out on the street.
Advocates of banning assault-grade weapons also had their chance to share their perspectives, as did members of law enforcement. The Cook County Sheriff says his officers are continually greeted with assault weapons or with guns outfitted with switches that turn other guns into automatic weapons. He says that happens when they pull over a car, check someone on electronic monitoring, or serve an eviction notice.
The lethality is absolutely amazing. If you ever tried to witness someone shooting with one of these things, when they put it on fully automatic, the chances of them actually hitting the person they're aiming is infinitesimal. That's not going to happen. What's going to happen is innocent people all around are going to get slaughtered. That's what's going to happen. These things are designed for that. There is no sane person who's going to sit there and say, in our society, we should have these.
And the Chicago Police Department saying the rise of these assault-grade weapons puts officers in danger.
I worry about their well-being, their morale, knowing that they're out-weaponed in the very streets that they're trying to protect. A rifle round can travel 2,200 feet per second with a path of destruction of 2 miles. The only thing stopping that round is property or person in our communities. Banning assault weapons is a must.
Now, as one witness said, each side is coming from such a different perspective, it is hard to see any middle ground here. Now, Paris, that is it for scheduled hearings this month, but do expect more. And then again, likely to have a vote when legislators return to Springfield for a lame duck session in January.
All right, Amanda, we'll continue to follow this. Thanks very much. And up next, a push to move away from using natural gas to heat homes. So please stay with us.
Do you think there's been sort of a rethinking of how those events happened here in Chicago?
I made a promise to myself in my career that every year I would make a piece of art dedicated to the memory.
Got into a zone of mentor to children. See what we can do to kind of elevate each other. We all we got at this point.
I'm using my past to push forward, to build a movement to create the world that we all want to see.
As the thermometer plunges this week, those natural gas heating bills are going to skyrocket. Almost 8 in 10 Illinois households use natural gas for heating, and that's according to the U.S. Census Bureau. And most U.S. households are projected to spend much more on energy this winter than last, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. It's prompting some consumer and environmental advocates to call for homes to go all electric with their heating. And joining us are Seth Whitehead, Executive Director of the Illinois Petroleum Resources Board, Mohammed Shahidapour, Professor and Director of the Center for Electricity Innovation at Illinois Tech, and Ann McKibben, Principal Director of Policy at the organization Elevate, and that's a nonprofit that works for clean, affordable heat, power, and water. We also reached out to Peoples Gas, the natural gas provider for the city, to join, but they declined. They did, however, give us a statement, which we will get to in a bit in this discussion. First of all, I thank all of you for being here. There was an editorial in the Tribune yesterday from PERG calling for Chicago households to go all electric with their heating. Ann McKibben, do you believe that that's the wise route to go?
Well, there are a lot of benefits to going all electric. The new cold climate heat pumps are incredibly efficient. They work well in really cold temperatures. And folks can save money, improve their indoor air quality. reduce their carbon emissions. And if you don't have air conditioning, that heat pump works both ways. In the summer, it turns into an air conditioner, which can be really nice as summers get hotter.
And we'll get to some of those benefits in a second. This is coming when gas bills are skyrocketing. Mohammed Shahidapur, what is behind the increase this year?
Well, you have to consider, although we produce a lot of gas, natural gas here in the United States, but you have to consider the global events. Certainly, issues in Ukraine did not help, and COVID-19 did not help. And I think we should expect to see higher prices in natural gas, at least for a while. But as Ann pointed out, I think we should consider other options. And generally, I believe we need to look into a more holistic solution rather than all natural gas or all electricity. We need to come up with an option that considers all those alternatives: natural gas, electricity, even hydrogen for heating home and producing what we need, the energy at home.
Seth Whitehead, is there a benefit to going all electric or to staying with natural gas or doing some hybrid approach?
Well, I think one of the things that is most important is the affordability of energy. And although natural gas prices are up this year, they had been prior to this year low for many, many years. And the Energy Information Administration just put out a winter fuels outlook, shows natural gas remains by far the cheapest heating option. So, you know, there's more than 1.5 million Illinoisans who are living below the poverty line. Those folks spend about a quarter of their income on energy costs. So the last thing they need is higher energy prices. And natural gas remains the cheapest option for home heating. And that's incredibly important. And it's incredibly important to have reliable home heating, especially with the weather we're getting this weekend.
And Ann McKibben, you alluded to this earlier, but what are the public health risks associated with gas heat, for example, gas burning stoves?
Mm-hmm. Well, anytime you're using gas, you're burning a fossil fuel in your house. And that releases certain pollutants. I think on a previous segment, folks talked about concerns about carbon monoxide poisoning. Carbon monoxide is one of those. Also, what we call NOx, which are pollutants that are bad for lung health. So those are the concerns. When you're using electric appliances in your house, you're not releasing those same combustion gases in the home.
And I do want to get to this statement from People's Gas. They said, quote, electric heat pumps may help keep Chicago warm in the future, but they cannot be relied upon today. Not only do they struggle to work in cold climates, but it costs approximately $60,000 to convert a single home to an electric heat pump. Mohammed Shahidapur, are these significant barriers here? Say policy called for residents converting from gas to electric heat?
Well, you know, in many states in the United States, a significant number, they're looking into eliminating the use of natural gas at home, in the new home. And again, I believe that we should not forget about electrification, in particular if you are interested as a country in a zero greenhouse gas emission issue goal. We need to consider that. However, it's going to be a while before we go all electric. So meanwhile, I think we should consider a hybrid solution. And I'm not going to comment on those figures as to how accurate they are, how much it's going to cost to convert a home to all electric. Or definitely, that should be an option if you are looking into a zero greenhouse gas emission in the future.
And Seth Whitehead, you said that right now, by far, natural gas is the most economical form of energy. Is that going to be the case years on down the road?
Well, if we continue to produce the amount of natural gas that the country demands, I believe the prices will remain low. There, of course, are barriers to that have been implemented, also infrastructure issues. But I think that, you know, if you look at just the world scene, Europe is in dire need of natural gas. It's not easily replaced. It's actually needed to back up renewable energy generation. So there's a great incentive for us to continue producing natural gas in the United States. We are the world's leading producer by a long shot. So we have the capability to do so. So I believe it will continue to be the most affordable home heating option.
And Seth, I should ask you the question about the health issues that Ann McKibben brought up. I mean, are those legitimate concerns?
Yeah, I think she mentioned NOx emissions, and I know that our NOx emissions just economy-wide or country-wide have declined dramatically as we've used more natural gas. I use natural gas to heat my home. I'm not aware of any sort of emissions concern in the household. It's vented outdoors. It's not a concern for myself. I do have a carbon monoxide detector upstairs and downstairs. So 80% of the folks in Illinois and in Chicago use natural gas to heat their homes. I think if this was a widespread issue, we'd hear a lot more about it. But I believe that 8% figure speaks for itself. It's a vast majority of the folks who feel it is the best option. And it's definitely kept a lot of folks warm in the winter.
And to that 80% figure, Ann McKibben, there are some municipalities across the country that have talked about ordinances that would require all new construction to be all electric. Would that be a wise route for Chicago to go?
Well, it's certainly an option. I think with the new, and something to think about with the new cold climate heat pumps, which have improved dramatically over the last decade. That may be part of why folks haven't gone all electric before, but with the new technology, it's certainly something to consider. Also, the cost of that technology is coming down. And we think it's important, this seems to be a trend in buildings. It's a trend in public policy and in the energy industry. And we think it's important to ensure that folks, especially folks who are vulnerable, who need that cooling in the summer, or folks who have low incomes, are able to make this transition first so that they're not left behind.
All right, well, however you heat your homes, we hope you do stay warm over the next few days as this storm comes. And we thank you for joining us tonight. Our thanks to Seth Whitehead, Mohammed Shahidapur, and Ann McKibben.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now, Brandis, we toss it back to you.
Paris, thank you. Actor and director Isaiah Washington's new film, Corsicana, explores the life of a black law enforcement officer with very notable stripes. Arts correspondent Angel Ito sat down with Washington while he was in Chicago promoting the film.
It's an opportunity to educate people through cinema. In this case, it's educating the public on historical icon Bass Reeves. He's said to be the first black deputy U.S. Marshal to serve west of the Mississippi River.
I was intrigued by the process because I didn't know who Bass Reeves was.
Shot in Corsicana, Texas during the pandemic, actor Isaiah Washington found himself taking on his first directing role after most of the production team had quit.
Producers quit. The original actors quit. And I'm like, where's everybody going? And the producers asked me, well, are you leaving? I said, no. I'm just going to do a Bass Reeves one-man show or something, right? Because it's important.
Assume you're a lawman?
Federal Marshal. I'm not going home. Walked into the production staff that was still on board and said, I'm directing. Didn't even hesitate. The rest was a blur. Took 120 pages, ripped them all out to 30 pages. And we started shooting those 30 pages until I rewrote everything about Bass Reeves in it.
For nearly 3 decades, the U.S. Marshal is said to have arrested some of the most dangerous fugitives of his time.
If I don't stop him, I will have blood on my hands.
Now, Washington credits the cast for their role in properly acknowledging Reeves and his story.
We all kill us, Sam. Bass Reeves doesn't die in the end. He's a good guy. He's a master at firearms. He's a lawman. He's great at disguises. He's very cunning. He's illiterate. He has a wife. He's wealthy. And he is diverse in how he works with other people. You all see that in the movie in 1 hour and 42 minutes. Not only important to be in the theater to be inspired, because I see how this movie changes people's DNA when they watch it. Who are you? I hope that Corsicana is the spark that unites melanated people in a holistic and beautiful way and not fall on deaf ears. Bass Reeves and so many like him deserve their stories to be told in the now by their own.
Bass Reeves.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
And you can see Corsicana, the story of Bass Reeves, at Cinema Chatham through the end of the year. Paris, back to you.
All right, Brandis, thanks a lot. And still to come on Chicago tonight, why the city is encrypting police scanners and what that means for news organizations covering crime and the public. Some are calling for the demolition of unauthorized construction next to a landmark building in Humboldt Park. We share the details. How to build a better relationship with food this holiday season and set realistic weight goals for the upcoming year. And are you behind on your holiday shopping? We peruse what's available at the Chicago Fair Trade Market for any last-minute gifts. But for some more of today's top stories, federal regulators order Wells Fargo to pay a record $1.7 billion fine for, quote, widespread mismanagement. The scandal-hit bank must also pay an additional $2 billion to compensate 16 million consumers. Regulators say the bank wrongfully foreclosed on homes, illegally repossessed vehicles, and charged surprise overdraft fees. In a statement, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau says Wells Fargo's rinse-repeat cycle of violating the law has harmed millions of American families. This is an important initial step for accountability and long-term reform of this repeat offender. Wells Fargo says the settlement resolved issues, quote, outstanding for several years and allows the bank to, quote, put these issues behind us. The U.S. House Ways and Means Committee votes to release former President Donald Trump's tax returns. The returns are expected to shed light on Trump's personal wealth and business practices. It also should be the culmination of a 3-year legal battle that went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Last month, the Supreme Court upheld without comment the ruling of an appeals court panel that cleared the way for the committee to get those tax returns. Trump broke with modern presidential practice when he refused to release his personal tax returns in 2016. Faculty at a Chicago public university are asking Governor J.B. Pritzker to step in and replace the school's board of trustees. Around a dozen or so faculty members from Northeastern Illinois University met with local state Senator Ram Villavalum today, asking him to push the governor to intervene in the situation. This after a majority of faculty voted no confidence in the board, citing plummeting enrollment, major staff cuts, and poor fiscal management. The board recently decided not to renew the contract of the school's president, Gloria Gibson. Villavalum says he will ask the governor to get involved.
It's clear to me that more work needs to be done to ensure that this university that serves so many from our underserved communities, a disproportionate number of Latino community members and women, that we need to make sure it's working.
A representative for the school's board did not offer comment this evening. And now to Brandis and controversy over new museum construction. Brandis.
Paris, some might recognize the castle-like building in Humboldt Park. It's called the Receptory Building and Stable, and it has Chicago and national landmark status. But new construction next to the historic building has some community members up in arms. WTTW News reporter Patty Wetley joins us now to explain. Patty, first tell us more about this historic building and what it's used for.
Yeah, well, this is one of those cases of they definitely don't build them like this anymore, because this building, described as vividly picturesque, dates back to 1896, and it was used to house horses, wagons, and landscaping tools. So kind of like the most glamorous shed ever, and was also the offices of Jens Jensen. Today, it's leased by the National Museum of Puerto Rican Arts and Culture.
Okay, so there's new construction, though, on this same site. Who's responsible, and why are people upset?
Well, the museum is responsible for it, and they're building an archive facility to house their collection, to expand their collection, and also to potentially house other museums' collections in case something happens to their facilities. People are up in arms for two reasons. One, they say this building obstructs the views of the landmark building, that it's not complementary at all, that it detracts from it. But perhaps even more importantly, the museum did not obtain permits of any sort to begin this construction or get the permission from the Chicago Park District, which is their landlord. So there's multiple issues on multiple fronts here.
And Patty, did you hear from the museum's leader or the park district to get their take? What'd they say?
Well, Billy Ocasio, who is a former alderman, did not respond to our request for comments. He's president and CEO of the museum, but he did tell other media outlets that this was an honest mistake, which people dispute given his familiarity with the permit process. And the park district said that right now they're evaluating their options and future actions. The people who are opposed to it would very much like this building to just get torn down and start over.
Wow, that's a lot going on over there. Patty Wetley,
Yes.
thank you so much for explaining it to us.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Patty's full story on our website. That's WTTW.com/news. And now to Paris and why police scanners across the city are going quiet. Paris.
Brandis, tune into a police scanner and you can get information about Chicago crime in your neighborhood in real time. It's something that journalists rely on to communicate emergency information. But Mayor Lori Lightfoot is moving forward with a plan to encrypt all police communications and delay them for 30 minutes, citing officer and victim safety. Local media organizations, however, say the move will endanger public safety and is a massive blow to police transparency. And joining us to break it all down, our 29th Ward Alderman Chris Taliaferro, attorney Stephen Mandel, who specializes in media and First Amendment law, and communications director for the ACLU of Illinois, Ed Yanka. Welcome all of you here to Chicago tonight. Alderman Taliaferro, I'll start with you. Remind us why the city is moving to encrypt all of its police scanners so people will not be able to hear these communications in real time.
And thank you, Paris, for having me. And I think you said it perfectly. You know, there's a move to ensure officer safety, as well as victim safety and public safety to some degree. So the city has decided to fully encrypt the radios that are police use.
And Alderman, as I understand, folks will be able to get this communication 30 minutes later on an app called Broadcastify, correct?
That's correct.
All right, well, let's listen to what, or let's look at what the city said in response to this. They said, quote, radios serve as lifelines for our first responders, and the encrypted radios will eliminate, quote, rogue radios and disruptive, often derogatory transmissions that disrupt the day-to-day traffic for emergency personnel. Having encrypted radios will provide added protection for communities and the personal information of victims, suspects, witnesses, and juveniles. Ed Yanka, have these police scanners become a safety issue?
Not that we're aware. And one of the things is not in any way that the public has ever really been, the information's been shared with them. There hasn't, for example, been public hearings about the need for this. There hasn't been outreach to the public to see, you know, how this will affect them in the way they follow police traffic and what's happening in their neighborhoods and all across the city. And, you know, this is a trend that we're seeing around the state and around the country, you know, where communities and police departments are putting their radio traffic behind this kind of encryption that really just creates a wall between the public and the police who are intended to serve the public.
And Stephen Mandel, you wrote a letter on behalf of media organizations in Chicago to Mayor Lightfoot asking her to rethink this. So what is this going to mean for journalists around the city that cover crime?
Well, first of all, Paris, I think it's a blow to public safety because a 30-minute delay, I mean, come on, when you have an active shooter situation or a tornado or any other kind of urgent situation, a bomb threat, a 30-minute delay, is that going to give the media, which acts as the eyes and ears of the public, the opportunity to warn people? Of course not. And then even more concerning is it's a blow to transparency. One of the jobs that the media performs is to shine a light on government. And here, the government is pulling a veil over people's eyes by encrypting their transmissions about how the police do their jobs.
Alderman Taliaferro, how do you respond to some of those concerns that the media won't be able to know emergency information, like if there's an active shooter somewhere or a tornado warning or something like that?
Well, Steve and I share some of the same concerns. You know, I think public safety has to be the most important aspect of what we're looking at when it comes down to encryption, along with police safety. I propose a model that's even simpler. You know, one of the problems that we had, Paris, and I'll say this very quickly, during this civil unrest caused by the murder of George Floyd, I heard it for myself, the encryptions that were going over the police broadcast system being made by ordinary citizens. That's a problem that could really put the lives of police officers in danger. And I agree that that should be encrypted. We should not be able to broadcast over police transmissions. We should not be able to broadcast over police radio. However, I do believe that it is a public safety issue when we can't get information out immediately as it's happening when there is an emergency or when an emergency
Alderman,
exists.
are you saying you're in support of some kind of compromise where perhaps journalists or members of the media would have access to this scanner communication in real time?
Absolutely. Without our journalists being on the scene because they've heard a broadcast, without them being on the scene and doing an immediate broadcast, we would not know for 30 minutes. And let me give you a very quick example. There was an explosion in my ward in the summer where a lot of residents were displaced, and there was even a fatality as a result of that explosion. I learned from the media that that explosion had occurred because the media was on site. So I agree that we should encrypt to keep our police officers safe, but we should not encrypt so that the public is getting information 30 minutes late.
All right, Ed Yonka with the okay, you wanted to jump in here.
I think one of the things about this is if we start thinking about a compromise, is thinking about who media is these days. Because as you know, there are several Twitter accounts around the city that really keep people up to date in terms of what's happening in their neighborhoods, what's happening across the city, and people really count on that as being a device and a tool that they use to know how the police are behaving. But it really, at the end of the day, you know, this talk of public safety, I understand, and I think we should always be concerned about officer safety, but we have to remember that the Chicago Police Department is under a consent decree, which is supposed to reform their policing to meet constitutional standards, and transparency and public trust is supposed to be a part of that. Simply rolling out this system without any public discussion and public debate doesn't help to build that confidence in that kind of public trust.
And many zones have already gone to encrypted communication.
It's already happened, exactly.
And it seemed to just kind of bubble up without any kind of hearings. As you mentioned, Steve Mandel, say there were some kind of carve-out here where members of the media would be able to hear this communication real time. Who should that include?
Well, the mayor and the city already has a protocol in place for credentialing media. And I think what we've proposed is that she use that same credentialing process. And if anyone violates, I can't imagine a situation where the media is going to give the bad guys information, but if anybody violates the protocol, they can be decredentialed. So I think those are in the details, but to get the details ironed out, the mayor has to meet with us first. I think we have a solution. I think all of us on this program are in agreement. We just have to have the mayor meet with us and iron it out.
And Steve Mandel, that was going to be my next question to you. Has there been any response from any representative from the mayor's office or CPD?
No, I think it's really troubling when you have every media outlet, nearly every media outlet in the city, including newspapers and television, ask the mayor to meet, and it's been a closed door.
Ed Yonka, there are other cities that do encrypt their communication in real time. How does it work in those cities?
I think in much the way that Mr. Mandel is talking about, he fears here, is that people don't have information in real time, that the media is often late to a story where there are no longer witnesses, and they rely, and I just talked to a news director from the Quad Cities last week who mentioned that they're rolling it out, and one of the things he's concerned about is they're then reliant on statements statements from police as being the official account of what's happened, and they know all too often that that isn't what actually occurs and that witnesses have a different perspective.
Obviously, that was a huge issue in the Laquan McDonald
exactly.
case. The initial statement from the police did not match up at all with what actually happened. So, Alderman Taliaferro, you're a supporter of public safety. You're chair of the Public Safety Committee. How do you move this debate forward to City Council and to the Mayor's office to come to some kind of resolution?
Well, first, I think we should encourage our Deputy Mayor of Public Safety, Ms. Elena Goderich, to discuss this matter with Steve. There's no reason why that conversation should not have been had already. And then I would recommend that we have a hearing on this matter. As I said before, even looking at things from a different perspective than the media, and that Steve and Ms. Edyanka have very eloquently stated. And I just want to say, we need to know when things are happening in real time for public safety reasons.
All right, seems like there is consensus on that issue, so we'll see where this discussion goes. For now, my thanks to Alderman Taliaferro, Edyanka, and Stephen Mandel. Thank you so much. There's more Chicago Tonight just ahead, but first, we take a look at the weather.
As the holiday weekend fast approaches, you might catch yourself overthinking the amount of calories on your plate. Diet tips might appear on the social media with suggestions about how to avoid holiday weight gain with what you might consider some unrealistic food substitutions. And then just a week later, New Year's resolutions might leave you feeling overwhelmed. Here to talk about healthy and sustainable ways to approach the holiday season and New Year is Jennifer Bruning, national spokesperson for the Chicago-based Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Jen, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Weight gain around the holiday season. What is the likelihood that we actually pack on the pounds? How much weight are we talking about here?
Yeah, well, the rates really vary depending on the research that you're looking at. But on average, the average American is not going to gain more than maybe a pound or two around the holiday season, which, while it's not nothing, it's also not something to be overly concerned about, excuse me, in the long run.
Can weight fluctuate very much, very quickly?
You know, it can for a couple of reasons. I mean, you really have to try to eat a whole lot more than you need for days in a row to truly gain weight simply from calories. But what can happen is if you're eating a lot more of something like salt day over day, and then you're staying hydrated, you may actually be gaining weight in the form of water weight because you're retaining more water from the salt that you've been eating.
So how should we then, sort of shift how we think about food and eating this season?
I think that for the most part, we only have a day or two during the holiday season when it's really tempting to be eating a lot of more indulgent foods. Generally, what I tell people is that the average relatively healthy person can go ahead and indulge in those holiday favorites and enjoy those things that they only eat once a year, because that is unlikely to be a cause of longer-term illness or longer-term weight gain. I really think it's just as important to think in terms of our health as whole people and enjoy our holidays with friends and family and really having a good time enjoying traditional holiday favorites.
Jen, how would you say diet culture has ingrained itself in our thinking, especially this time of year?
I think there's a temptation in it, and I understand it's from a good place. And there's been times I think I myself have even suggested these things, that we try to alter traditional holiday favorites to make them more lighter, more healthy, more diet friendly, so that we can keep on, some kind of a plan that we've been on for weeks or months during the course of the year. More and more, I think a lot of dietetics professionals are recognizing that there is something deeply important about honoring the tradition from where these recipes and these dishes come from, and making those changes really takes away from the holiday as opposed to enhancing it in any way that's really all that good for us in the long run.
Do certain foods in particular, get a bad rap? Looking at you, carbs.
I think that when we look at the history of things like fad diets, most of the different macronutrients have fallen into the bad category through time. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, it was fat. Now carbohydrates tend to take the shot. ultimately, I think there are a lot of things that are actually very good for us, and they really do give us a lot of nutrition. Things like carbohydrates. I think of sweet potatoes because that's one of my favorite dishes at the holidays. And yes, we do tend to doctor them up with butter and marshmallows and these other, indulgent things. But at their core, sweet potatoes are still a healthy food. And so that's something where, yes, we can definitely start to blame the base food and say, oh, sweet potatoes are too high in carbs. Really, they're a very healthy food that it's all dressed up for the holidays.
Should we, like, since you mentioned it, should we introduce any healthy swaps, or should we, sort of stick to what we know? Should I use less butter in the sweet potatoes?
I think that really varies person to person, and it really comes down to what's important to you, your family, your levels of enjoyment. What I like to recommend to people more often than making swaps in a recipe that's really important is just adding in a few lighter options. And that way you can kind of create a plate that has some of those portions of more indulgent foods that you love, and you balance it out with something that's a little bit lighter, whether it's a fruit plate or a salad or, veggie tray, whatever that looks like. There's a way to kind of create balance without taking away from those dishes that mean so much to us.
And we're looking at My Plate from myplate.gov from the USDA with some advice on how to portion the plate and what it should look like. And then, of course, Jen, there's the new year, right? And everybody goes into it thinking, this year I'm gonna do it right. I'm gonna get it right. And we know the gyms tend to fill up. What are some common mistakes that people make when they're heading into the new year, thinking, new year, new you?
I think that people will set lofty goals without having filled in the steps to get there in a really sustainable, maintainable, and achievable way for their life. So case in point, you talk about the gyms filling up. That happens in my gym every first couple of weeks of January. Suddenly it's hard to get to the machines and things like that. And, I think what happens with people is they will set a goal like, I will lose 30 pounds, by March, something that's a large amount of weight, a small amount of time. They make a lofty goal because they know someone else maybe who's been able to achieve that. And then maybe they don't really look at the steps to take to get to that goal, which inevitably then leads to either feelings of failure, not having met it, or extreme unhealthy measures to try and meet this goal that wasn't really achievable to begin with. So I think it's important that we're really honest with ourselves about a realistic goal and then backfill with steps that we know that we can maintain to be able to achieve that goal.
Bottom line, enjoy the sweet potatoes with your family this holiday season. Jen Bruning, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me.
And now, Paris, we toss it back to you.
Thanks, Brandis. This time of year when to-do lists are long and time is short, actually leaving the house for holiday shopping might seem like a daunting task. But Chicago Fair Trade's vendors are hoping the prospect of buying artisan gifts that support local nonprofits is enough to lure you out of your pajamas and into their holiday pop-up shop. Producer Erica Gunderson stopped in to check out their goods that do good.
You go home, get you a nice Bright Endeavors candle and light it, you'll be good to go.
Candles made by the social enterprise Bright Endeavors are among the goods that do good on offer at the Chicago Fair Trade pop-up holiday market through December 24th.
We've got 7,500 square feet of fair trade products: coffees, teas, chocolates, cookies, salts, clothing, jewelry, scarves, hats, mittens, gloves, home goods. Most trade is very unfair. 99% of trade is, the bottom line is just to make as much money as you possibly can. With fair trade, it turns that upside down. Everyone along the supply chain is treated fairly and with respect.
Many of the Chicago Fair Trade vendors, like Bright Endeavors, operate on a social enterprise model, employing young people to make home goods while learning crucial employment skills.
The moms that we serve are between the ages of 18 and 24, and for most of those young moms, this is their first job, and so they really get to come into a safe place to really expand their workplace skills, really learn about their executive skills, and they are paid to do that work, and so that really advances our moms towards economic mobility and career growth.
For me, they supported me a lot. And that support system and that I call it my little motherhood, sisterhood, that's what you need to get going, because you never know what no one's going through. But when you walk through the Bright Endeavor doors, it's like a ball of sunshine.
Similarly, HHP Lift offers young men social emotional support and skill development while creating home and self-care products.
They get a chance to learn the process of actually
making something from scratch with their own efforts, providing them an opportunity to see that they are cared for, that they are thought of, that there are opportunities. And we talk about fair trade. I think a lot of times the same things come into play, where we think about people being held back, opportunities being really and truly not available. And so a lot of the gentlemen, if it wasn't for the workforce programs like HHP, they wouldn't have these opportunities. The products that they have are sustainable, they're well made, but more important than that is what they stand for. Again, giving individuals who don't necessarily have an opportunity. And so it may be just a simple bag to some, but it means so much more to others.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Erica Gunderson.
The Chicago Fair Trade pop-up shop is on North Halsted in the New City neighborhood. It's open through December 24th. And you'll find more information on that on our website. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Tuesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing, and you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
That's right. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app, and please join us tomorrow night live at 7. The issue of crime and violence takes center stage in the mayor's race. Our Spotlight Politics team on that and much more.
And a look at how some are preparing ahead of this week's anticipated blizzard. We've been talking about it a lot tonight.
What blizzard?
I haven't heard about a blizzard.
There's a blizzard coming?
There's a blizzard coming.
It's going to be balmy and...
No, never.
And nice and calm.
Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great evening.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.